Well, here we are. Around Pittsburgh, the end of October means the end of the shooting season, just about. There's one more match out in eastern Ohio in early November, but even if the weather's nice, I'm probably not going to shoot that one for reasons that will become clear in a little while. I want to start, though, by talking briefly about my goals for 2021. I've heard it said that process goals are better than outcome goals in our game, because outcome goals depend in part on other people. Unless you're flat out the best, the roster in your division at a given match affects your performance at that match, and unless you're picking the stages for every match you shoot, the interplay between your strengths and weaknesses and the classifiers you draw affects your classification percentage. That being said, against my own advice, I did have some outcome goals for the year. First up, I wanted to place well in Revolver at one of my two major matches. I'd say I achieved that one. The 95% second place at Battle for the North Coast was against some pretty strong competition, so I feel good about it. And the outright win at Virginia State, of course, feels great. And the belt's over there on top of my reloading bench now, too. So, and those went about as... second, I wanted to get to at least A class. I managed that one with 3 matches to go in the year, and made the jump into the non-alphabetic classifications at the last possible moment. Another 100% run put me into M. So both of those goals went about as well as could have been hoped. Those outcomes, though, flowed from the process goals that I managed to keep to pretty well through the year, too. On the theory that attainable goals are better than impossible goals, I kept my dry fire goals pretty light. 3 nights a week, 20 minutes a day. Most weeks, though, I was dry firing 4 or 5 weeknights and at least once on the weekends, so I got to feel good about, surpassing that goal, like I said. Live fire was much more of a mixed bag. I wanted to shoot 2 matches a month plus 1 live fire practice session and did not quite manage it. The matches were pretty easy. There are 2 Saturday matches a month within 45 minutes of me, which meshes well with my preference not to shoot on Sunday mornings when I can avoid it. But the live fire practice I didn't quite get across the line there. It mostly comes down to ammo rationing. Components were getting pretty scarce late in the summer, and I wanted to have rather enough on hand to shoot into 2022 if I couldn't restock. I have subsequently restocked, and should be good to go for regular live fire practices next year, although on a pretty light schedule compared to the norm for serious competitors. I'm still kind of experiencing that component shortage a bit. So, some training goals emerged from my review of 2021. Number 1, I need to work on shot calling, which I don't really do at all. I don't call my shots much at all when I'm shooting stages, and I have a hard time doing it consciously in practice. That's probably my biggest missing skill at the moment. I can shoot accurately, on demand more or less, but I can't do the Steve Anderson score the stage in real time thing, and I'd like to work on that through the winter. So what I can afford in terms of ammo for live fire practice over the winter is going to be mostly spent on that. Item number 2 is difficult swingers. I did pretty well on movers at Battle for the North Coast, but they had a lot of bobbers, and I guess a slow swinger or two, rather than a lot of small, fast swingers like Virginia State had. And the ones at Virginia State, of course, didn't go super well, since they were, also pretty far away. Anyway, that's something I can set up at the range now that I have a key to the prop shed, and I plan on getting one of those dry fire stingers from the Ben Steger Pro Shop too. One of the nice things about Revolver is that dry fire is very nearly perfectly representative of what happens when you pull the trigger live, just there's more of a bang in the second case. So being able to use that superpower to practice on swingers seems like a good idea to me. Item number 3 is some reload technique improvements. Some practice earlier this year has me convinced that reloading higher up near my chest as opposed to bringing the gun all the way down to my belt will be reliably faster that way, rather. So I can hit in practice a pretty consistent, dry fire there, a consistent, reliable 1.8 or so, click to click, reloading down at my belt, and I can probably get that down to maybe 1.6 if I have it up high, and those 2/10 make a big difference when you're moving between 2 close positions, say. Finally, item number 4, movement. I feel like this is already a decent strength of mine, and I want to keep on working on it to make sure it stays that way. There's room to improve my position entries and exits, and also on reloading it while moving at higher speeds, rather. So winter training leads to 2022 eventually, so we'll talk about process goals for 2022 first. Number 1, I want to slightly up my training schedule, say 30 minutes of dry fire 3 times a week instead of 20 minutes, and the same live fire goals as 2021, except I'll actually try and hit them this time, since I've got components to do that and still shoot the matches I want to shoot pretty comfortably. So second, I want to get my gun working and stop fiddling with it. I'm very nearly there, but we'll come back to that in a second. And third, aspirationally, I'd kind of like to take a class if there's one nearby, or maybe even pay Steve Anderson a visit since we're, it's like a 3-hour drive. It's not too bad. Fourth and finally, in terms of match schedule, I'm planning to work the Western PA section in Battle for the North Coast again, and I'd like to get 2 more majors in there for next year. It's probably Area 8 and the Virginia State match as a paid competitor. Nationals isn't on the list because of goal number 2. It may go on the list if I can get a staff slot so broken gun doesn't sting as much, but right now I don't know that I trust it enough to take it to, the very biggest stage. Hopefully we can get that sorted out over the winter too. So I guess that's kind of a 5th little winter goal. No, wait, that's number 2. Never mind, I've already been there. Anyway, I'd be lying if I said I had no outcome goals. I'd really like to earn my Revolver GM in 2022, and I think I'm pretty well placed to do so with the 200s on my record right now. Now that I'm in M, I could kind of hero zero it and just go for broke, but I don't think I'd want to get it that way. I'd rather shoot my way into GM at the pace I'm comfortable shooting and work on pushing that pace to Grandmaster levels rather than shoot for the moon and luck my way in. Revolver's, I think, one of the divisions where you can do that. I mean, if you're shooting open, you probably just have to, really crank the speed and go as fast as you can, since you're shooting against high hit vectors that are based on other people having done that in the past. But in wheelgun, I think it's probably attainable shooting at match pace if you're, if you got the chops for it. So on to the final point, the gun, the Ruger. The trigger pull is actually right now the best it's ever been, thanks to removing some material where the double action sear was interfering with part of the trigger. That probably needs a video to explain, or at least a picture, and I don't have one, so maybe I'll be doing one of those later on in the winter. Anyway, so thanks to that, I no longer feel the need to chase spring weight or ignition, which means I can get rid of most of the aftermarket things in the gun, and hopefully get it to factory kinds of reliability. But I guess, as I said earlier, we'll see how that goes over the winter. So my main problem still is the gun jamming issues. It's the gun's currently at Ruger, where they're going to take a look at it some. I took some measurements that may be suggestive of what's going on, which I will have to explain since the Ruger's at, since the Ruger is at Ruger, I'll have to use this prop to explain the pride and joy of my historical firearms collection, a 1917 Webley Mark VI. Anyway, so there are 3 important measurements for revolver function, basically. So the first is the barrel cylinder gap. So what you do is you hold the cylinder to the rear, and with a feeler gauge you measure the gap between the cylinder face and the forcing cone. If that's too small, then you can get the cylinder will start dragging on the forcing cone as it turns in double action, which will cause sticky triggers and other miscellaneous jam-like problems. Too large a barrel cylinder gap means you'll get lower velocity for a given load, and if it's big enough, you might start getting not just fouling around like on the frame, but also little lead particles spitting out and stinging you in the hands / stinging spectators if they're standing too far forward. Measurement number 2 is the headspace. That's if you hold the cylinder to the rear, you measure between the head of an unfired case and the recoil shield. The head of an unfired case in the back of the cylinder and the recoil shield. So what that's telling you is, basically what too much headspace can cause misfires because the firing pins got further to reach. Too little headspace can also cause the cylinder to drag, as fired cases will expand backwards a little bit and start to scrape on the recoil shield. So the final measurement is the end shake. So you've got that initial barrel cylinder gap measurement. What you do for end shake is you hold the cylinder forward instead and take that measurement again. The end shake's the difference between the two. It's just the amount the cylinder can move forward and back under recoil. Too little end shake can, say it with me, cause the cylinder to drag and double action to bind up. Too much can cause problems with timing and lockup and other revolver voodoo. So end shake above a certain threshold tends to be a self-reinforcing problem since it's caused by the forward and back hammering motion of the cylinder when the gun fires. Lots of end shake means the cylinder's moving a long way, which means it picks up more speed and delivers a harder strike to the frame, which causes wear in all the places that cause end shake further on. So that's around the ejector column, or the ratchet column here, which kind of sets the forward and back position of the cylinder, at least on the Rugers. It may not be the same on all guns. So you get wear there, you get wear on the yoke or crane, depending on if you're a Smith or a Ruger guy, and you get where on the inside of the cylinder where it interfaces with the yoke and or crane. Anyway, I'm hoping Ruger looks at the measurements I took and the gun I sent in and says, oh yeah, definitely a problem. Here, we'll get it fixed and send it right back to you. And if not, well, I guess we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. I think I'm probably going to switch to the 147 grain blue bullets, though probably with clays or bullet or maybe ramshot zip or something. The conical nose makes them the easiest one to drop into the cylinder, and even over a slow powder like CFE pistol, I couldn't tell the difference between them and my softball 160 grain loads on the clock. And the, like I say, the ramshot zip 147 grain lead load has the advantage of being in a reloading book, so I know that it's not, dramatically overpressure. Anyway, that's pretty much my 2021 season in review. So, like I said, I'll probably do that one more video to highlight a few of my best performances of the year, and also maybe one more on the interactions in the Ruger trigger system. But otherwise, we're just about done for wheel gun content until spring. Unless, of course, I think of something else I want to say beyond those two videos. Anyway, thanks for following along, and I'm looking forward to see what 2022 brings.